So my name is Omar Abbaset, and it is 4:37 p.m., June 22nd, 2019. And I'm just going to give you a little sample of the temperature changes. And that beep indicates I have a fever, which I don't, but it feels like I do have a fever. Lethargic, achy all over. Um, I feel feverish, and it comes and goes. One minute I feel good, and the next minute I don't. And interestingly enough, this is exactly what my brother used to say, who suffered kidney failure. He was offered a transplant, and look at that huge decrease suddenly. He was offered a kidney transplant and was given hope, and he took it, and the kidney that was put into him failed. So they gave it to him, and they took it. Well, it was given to him, I should say. Not, I shouldn't say they. It was given to him, and unfortunately, the hope that was given to him was taken away by fate. Maybe, who knows? Who knows how these things work? So 36.9. So I don't have a fever. I just demonstrated that. 36.8. That's normal. Normal is 36.4 to 36.8. 36.7. 36.7. 36.6. So that's normal. So I'm going to I'll show you the power around my body that's causing the temperature changes. The power is turned up. You see the numbers. The back. My back is really sore. So I'm going to take my pressure, and I'll show you the readings that I did during the day and yesterday. So the power is turned up. See that 900 there? So the power is up and down. I am constantly being tagged, but the power varies up and down, up and down, up and down. That's my thighs. That's my foot. So my full body is being scanned. Full body scan. See that 1400 there? So I'm going to take a guess and say that there is more than one person logged in. I heard outside the window that Stan has the account monitored globally. And Chris, this is somebody who worked with me while I was working with Stan, was logged in. And Stan thought that he would have me for life. So these are the comments outside my window. As I said, I'm talking about a possible sex slavery that is run also in the workplace. So the building is being used as home base to select and to train, and then the selling is done to the companies that the person works in. If you're working as an accountant, you're sold in the companies. I'm suspecting that Rohini Besasar was being sold this way in the places she worked in, and she was being experimented on. But the experimentation was really related to customizing her to her clients that she didn't know that she had. So remotely, people were covertly logging on to her, like I just demonstrated. And the experimentation that was being run on her was to, first of all, to test her based on the other reports that was being submitted about her by previous info, clients who had observed her remotely and logged into her. And then the current client, quote unquote, experimented on the previous report, like they do with me. How do I know that? Well, the traffickers outside my window talk about this all the time, people who are logging in. Because I'm turned out, people can say and do anything to me and get away with it. So they openly talk about it outside the window. That's the idea of being turned out. So this is most likely what happened to Rohini Besasa. She was turned out. Exactly. So her entire family turned against her um, because she had family issues, and maybe the family didn't like what she did. So they had reason to turn on her. So right now she's sitting in a psych ward with no support because nobody will help her. And this is the whole idea of being turned out. The idea is to make you so repulsive by these reports and these experimentation and these violations and let everybody know about it that nobody will want to have anything to do with you. Well, the experiments that's being run with these frequencies is for somebody who knows about the technology and did your research and still have their wits about them and didn't let it get to them to the point where you split, which is the whole idea of the torture. Um, People who recognizes that these are signals that have two sides to it. There a good side, there is a good side, and there is a bad side. So obviously, the perpetrators are using it for the bad. So you can turn that around, these experiments, and actually learn from them. So instead of going berserk or split, you can actually turn the negative into a positive. So a lot of these experiments that's being run with these signals, if somebody, if the target and the victim is aware of what's going on and how it's being done and do a little bit of research, you can actually use it to your advantage. And by that I mean you can learn from the experiments and talk about it like I'm doing, teach other people what it's all about, so they can prevent themselves from being victimized this way. Because obviously we live in a very predatory world. We can protect kids. Because if you don't know what's being done and how it's being done, you can't protect yourself from it. So when the perpetrators outside my window say things like, well, she's keeping her legs open, well, first of all, if you pulse somebody with this technology and your temperature rises depending on the power from 1 to 5 degrees, you will kind of flay your arms and feet and legs around to keep cool. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're opening up your legs to be pulsed sexually. And even if you are opening your legs, it doesn't also mean that you're doing it consciously, because this training, a lot of this training is taking place while you're asleep or you're in a semi-awake state where your brainwave patterns are in um, a certain level in a certain range, because the programming is done on a certain in a certain level of consciousness. This is what nesting means, and the trigger when it's built in. This is a psychological program that's been run really. Um, and this is the testing and the experimentation that's part of the customization. That is the experiment that Rohini Besasai, I suspect, is talking about. only she didn't, unfortunately, didn't do enough research. I imagine she probably did, but not all victims figure out exactly what's been done and how it's been done. Um, I come from, fortunate for me, I come from an Indian background and a very spiritual mother. And I inherited, I'm happy to say and proud to say, I inherited some of her spiritual traits. It's in my genes. Um, and, um, and I was exposed from my brother's, from being around my brother when he was younger, before he came to this country, to a lot of spiritual, not religious, spiritual um, thinking and and spiritual practices to engage your consciousness and to become more aware of yourself and the world around you, in a from a different perspective, from the perspective that everything and everybody is connected. So my brother, even though I rage against him sometimes, um, before he came to this country and was, I suspect, being experimented on, um, he was very spiritual, and he was up to the day he died. He just I believe that he was put in very vulnerable positions, and he was drugged and medically drugged, and just tortured and tortured and tortured, and for lack of a better word, mind control into doing and saying certain things. And this is how this program works. It makes you abusive. It makes you want to be abusive. Um, but if for getting away from my brother for a minute, and speaking for myself, if you're aware of what's going on, if you're aware that there is a psychological program being run, you don't have to fall victim to it necessarily. You can actually use it um, as a learning um, as a learning process, even though it's torture, excruciating torture, and excruciatingly painful, emotionally and physically. You can use it to grow spiritually, and you can also learn about the technology. And as I was saying before, you can't talk about it if you don't know what's going on. And the only way you know what's going on is, unfortunately, to live through it, which I did, and it's still going on. In fact, it's been escalated because I am talking about it, and I am trying to educate people about what's being done so they can protect themselves. There is a satanic agenda behind it, but that's not the only reason this is being run. It's about power and control and enslavement, mental enslavement, physical enslavement, um, spiritual enslavement. And it's just, in my point of view, contrary to humanity, why we were put on this earth. We were put on this earth to help each other progress in every which way possible. We were not put on this earth to fight each other and destroy one another's worlds and lives and kids and rape and kill for um, for power over somebody else. If you have power over yourself, you don't need power over anybody else. And this is what spirituality is all about. Spirituality teaches you to have control over yourself. And once you have control over yourself in every aspect possible, you don't need control over anybody else. It's not necessary. And this is where our true power lies. It's not in the dollar. It's not about exerting power over somebody else by abusing them and threatening to kill them and rape them and murder them and stalk them and harass them. That's not what the power is. The power is in control, in controlling yourself. Talk to you another time.